Hello and welcome. My name is Edseth-Griffin, and I'm going to tell you a story. A story that you already know quite well, actually, because it's a story that people of our culture have been enacting for thousands of years. And by exploring it, we're going to answer the question of how things came to be this way. This video is the first in a series where I'll be exploring a trilogy of books, Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. The premise of the first book is this. An ad in the paper reads, "Teacher seeks pupil. Must have an earnest desire to save the world. Apply in person." If that sounds compelling to you, indeed, if you have an earnest desire to save the world, these books and this video are for you. I'm going to be doing my best to share what the teacher, Ishmael, teaches in the book. Before I can begin, though, I need to lay some groundwork. First, what do I mean by our culture? I say it pretty confidently, despite having no assumption that you are from the same country or even continent as I am. The culture I'm referring to when I say our culture is the total of all peoples you and I have been taught to consider are civilized or reasonable or advanced. I juxtapose this group with another. Those people you and I have been conditioned to believe are savage or primitive. In other words, everybody else. For our purposes here today, I will be giving these groups different names. You've heard the phrase take it or leave it. Well, the people of our culture will be referred to as takers, and everybody else will be referred to as leavers. The reason for these names is going to become clear down the line. The important thing is that we use these terms because they're relatively neutral. If these terms aren't neutral for you, I'm sorry. I can't make this story more bespoke to you just by the nature of this medium, but these are the ones they use in the book as well. So this is what we're going with. So we have takers and we have leavers. But what's the difference? Where do we draw that line? The line is drawn on the basis of the stories these different cultures are enacting. Now we need some definitions. First, what is a story? A story is, in this context, a story is an explanation of the interplay between humans, the gods, and the earth. The gods in this case doesn't mean any particular gods. It's just the mythical force of creation in the universe. Enacting a story means living as if that story is true. And a culture is a group of people all enacting one story. So takers and leavers are just different groups of people living as if different explanations of the interplay between humans, the earth, and the gods are true. The story we're exploring today is the story being enacted by the takers, by us. It's a story you already know, even if you don't know that you know it. Once it's been pointed out to you, you'll probably see it everywhere. And if you're anything like me, and the narrator of this book, you'll feel angry and incredulous. How can you all not see this? How can we let this go on? One more thing. In the book, Ishmael, the teacher, Ishmael, is in direct dialogue with the narrator. This means Ishmael gets to be a very Socratic teacher. He asks a lot of questions and draws this story out of the narrator. Given the nature of this medium, which is just me talking to you and you not really talking back, I can't do that. So instead, I have to just tell you the story. I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to give the explanations I think are necessary, and I'm just going to have to hope that it's as meaningful for you as it was for me the first time I read the book. But if you're struggling with this format, or even if you aren't, I implore you, go read Ishmael and its sequels, The Story of Bee and My Ishmael, and probably those will work well for you. All right, that was a lot of groundwork laying, a lot of bookkeeping, but now I think we can actually begin with the story. It's not a story you've probably had told to you directly. Instead, it's a story you've absorbed. It's been whispered in your ear over your life by mother culture. You know this story intuitively, even if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. This story is an explaining story, and it starts with the creation myth. Though, after I tell it to you, you'll probably be surprised to hear it called thus. There's nothing mythological about this. It's entirely factual, it's scientific, it's plainly obvious. The Taker creation myth is full of facts, that's true, but its premise is entirely mythological. As all stories do, this story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And right now, we're at the beginning. About 13.8 billion years ago, our universe began. Not long after that, the stuff in the universe started turning into things, things like stars and galaxies. Our star and planet Earth showed up about 4.5 billion years ago. Not too long after that, Earth got water. And about 3.5 billion years ago, life began in that water. Life was simplistic at first, single celled organisms. Eventually, multi-celled organisms appeared, aquatic plants appeared. That was about 1.5 billion years ago. As life got more and more complex, the Earth's atmosphere started to become hospitable, and the Cambrian explosion happened, where vertebrates showed up along with land plants. This was about 500 million years ago. Over time, those species continued to evolve and go extinct, rise and fall. Some of those vertebrates became mammals. Some of those mammals moved up into the trees. Those were the first primates. And then, about 3 million years ago, some of those primates came down from the trees, and finally, humans appeared. That is the first part of our story, the creation myth. Sounds pretty good, right? Maybe some of the years were a little off. I'm not an expert on that. But I think if I told that to an 8th grade biology class, most people wouldn't have a real problem with it. You probably didn't see too much wrong with that story either, but I'm telling you, there's something mythological about it. Did you catch it? Maybe I can help you by telling you another story. This one would have been told about 500 million years ago, and it's also a creation myth. A little over 13 billion years ago, the universe began. Not long after that, the stuff in the universe started turning into things. Things like stars and galaxies. Our star and planet Earth showed up about 4 billion years ago. Not too long after that, Earth got water, and about 3 billion years ago, life began in that water. Life was simplistic at first, single celled organisms. Eventually, multi celled organisms evolved, plants evolved. That was about 1 billion years ago. As life got more and more complex, finally, jellyfish appeared. Now that's kind of a silly story, right? Of course it is. But what makes it silly? It's silly because we know so much more happened after jellyfish appeared. Saying, finally, jellyfish appeared, implies that that's what this was all leading up to. But we know that isn't true. Humans were still millions of years away. Finally, humans appeared. Isn't that right? Finally, humans appeared. If we personify the universal force of creation as the gods, what does that imply about their intentions? It implies that they made all of this for us, that this was all leading up to humans. But did the gods stop creating after they made humans? No new animal species, no new plants, no new stars, no new galaxies, no new nothing? No, of course they didn't. Hidden within our fact based, scientifically sound, plainly obvious history that we all know is a mythological premise. The premise that this was all leading up to us. The premise that this was all made for us. And what does it mean if this was all made for us? It means we can do whatever we damn well please with it. We dump oil and plastic into it. We build parking lots on it. We pillage it and force it to sustain us in ways that don't allow it to be sustained. And so it is that humankind has claimed the earth and her resources for themselves. Now that we've found the beginning of the story and uncovered its premise, we can get to the middle of the story and discover humankind's destiny. The earth was made for humans, but it took humans a long time to figure this out. They spent the better part of their existence bumbling about, hunting and gathering, not much better than beasts. This lifestyle made it impossible for them to achieve much of anything beyond simply existing. Eventually, though, around 10,000 years ago, humans realized they weren't meant to live like beasts. They were meant to live in their own human way. In order to do this, they needed to settle down so they could get to work, so to speak. But they knew that if they kept on hunting and gathering while staying in the same spot, it wouldn't take long for them to hunt and gather all that human food in the area and starve themselves. So they had to learn to control the land, increase the production of human food. Thus, they invented totalitarian agriculture. This new way of living would give rise to society, civilization, industry, technology, trade, commerce, order. But the Earth didn't sit idly and let the humans assume their control. She fought back. The Earth was made for humans, but the Earth was a chaotic and dangerous place, a jungle. Did the gods mean for Earth to be a jungle forever? No. Why else would they have made humans? In order for humans to live the way they were meant to live, they had to bring order to all this chaos. In other words, they had to rule the Earth. Humans were made to rule the Earth in this story, but the jungles did not part for humans to build parking lots on, nor did the seas shrink to make it easier for them to cross. No, Earth stood in humankind's way. She needed to be conquered if she was ever going to be ruled. Now we know humankind's destiny. The Earth was made for humankind, and humans were made to conquer and rule it. Taking this destiny into account, it becomes pretty clear why it is that Taker culture doesn't seem too concerned with the fact that the Earth's resources are running low, that she's suffering, and that her ability to sustain us is getting weaker. This is simply the price for humankind to fulfill its destiny. We chose the path of a good time, not a long time. As I said before, this story explains the interplay between humans, the Earth, and the gods. And from the middle of the story, we can gain the relationship between humankind and Earth. At the core of this relationship is conflict, which is to say, humankind is at war with the Earth. So, the Earth was made for humankind, and humankind was made to conquer and rule it. This is what we know from the beginning and the middle of the Taker story. Now let's see how that story ends. Humankind's conquest of the Earth was nearly complete, but in their conquest, they had created for themselves a problem. In the millennia of conflict, the Earth's resources had begun to dry up. Soon, she would become uninhabitable for humankind unless they were able to achieve perfect mastery over her. If they could prevent natural disasters, establish renewable energy, cut all pollution, control the weather, they could create the paradise the gods had intended for them. Tragically, however, humankind is fundamentally flawed. Because of this flaw, they will continue to war with each other, drain the earth, cause catastrophe after catastrophe, and they will fail to achieve paradise. What is humankind's fundamental flaw? Why is it that they will inevitably fail to achieve perfect mastery over the earth in the Taker story? The fundamental flaw of humankind is that they have no certain knowledge of how to live. Not only this, but according to Mother Culture, that knowledge cannot be found anywhere. It doesn't exist. Humankind will never have certain knowledge of the right way to live. I'm sure you've probably noticed this idea that humankind is fundamentally flawed. It's why we say, I'm only human. And looking at our history, Taker history, it's pretty hard to argue with this assertion. Taker history is full of war, violence, hubris, destruction. But Taker history only started maybe 12,000 years ago with the agricultural revolutions. Humans have been around a lot longer than that, and not every human culture is a Taker culture. Because the Taker story lives only where humankind works to fulfill its destiny, Taker culture says this knowledge of the right way to live can't be found anywhere, because if it could be found anywhere, it would be found within our history, and we've already looked there. And if it cannot exist, there's no point trying to look for it anymore, so we don't. Instead, we just go on trying to master the earth. You'll notice lots of people actually do care about the ecological disaster we're creating for ourselves. More people than ever, in fact. I posit this is because the Taker way of life is slowly but surely becoming unfashionable. Millions, even billions of people are beginning to see the holes in this story. the fallacy in its logic. But still, we don't really know the right way to live. The third book in the series, My Ishmael, explores this idea a lot deeper than the first one. Ishmael has a completely different pupil, a young girl, who wonders where we're supposed to look to find this information, to find the right way to live. Probably I will tell that story sometime, but we're not even done with this bit, so it'll have to be in the future. If you're anything like me, you hate the way things are. You're really tired. You look around and you see how messed up the world is, and you just can't help but wonder, how did we get here? Couldn't we have found some other way? By enacting this story, wherein humans are the destined conquerors of the earth and the rightful rulers of her resources, it is by our culture enacting this story that things have come to be this way. We've been living as if it is our destiny to conquer and rule the earth or die trying, and that there's just no other way to do it. It's a depressing story because we don't seem to be winning the battle with Earth. We seem to be losing. I'm happy to report that the knowledge of another way to live is out there. It exists in the parts of human history that Taker culture tells us don't matter because they aren't Taker culture. Taker culture tells us that we were no better than the beasts when we were hunting and gathering because we weren't fulfilling our destiny. I think what we've learned by examining this story is that we need to question that. There's a pretty obvious leap to make after I just said that statement, which is that I'm suggesting we should go back to hunting and gathering, which is not the case. And that's not what Ishmael or Daniel Quinn are saying either. The right way to live means enacting a different story, one where humans aren't the destined rulers of the earth. And I'm really sorry to do this, but this video is long enough, so if you want to learn what that story is, you'll either have to wait for me to talk about it in the next one, or you can go read the books yourself. Ishmael, The Story of B, and My Ishmael, all by Daniel Quinn. I recommend all of them. Probably in time, though, I am going to get through the entire series in this sort of video format, but I'm less than halfway through the first book after this video, so it could be kind of a long series. For now, though, observe the Taker story around you. Observe Mother Culture whispering in your ear as you do that. But above all, take care of yourself. You can't help save the world if you haven't saved yourself. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.